Hi, this is Matthew Loel T. Hepworth from Ask.Audio magazine, and this video is a companion to our full review of the Audified U73b compressor on Ask.Audio. And we wanted to make this video to show you a little bit about the plugin and how really great it sounds. So what I've got here is a project that has a whole bunch of tracks, but none of the tracks have any compression on them right now. And so what we're going to do is use the U73b as a bus compressor. You can certainly use it on individual tracks, but just to show you what I'm talking about, here I have all the drum tracks, and if I enable those in my mixer, right now you can see there are no inserts on any of the drum tracks, and there's nothing here in the strip, which, all of this is Cubase specific. It doesn't have anything to do with the U73b, but just to show you, I don't have any compression on any of the original tracks. So we're just going to be listening to the buses and how the U73b works on each individual bus that we have in the project. So let's take a listen to the drums first. So I'm going to reveal the control panel for the U73b right here, and I'm going to solo the drums, and let's just take a listen to what's happening with the compressor right now. Then we'll turn it on and off so you can hear the difference. Now right now it is a little squishy, it is a little bit obvious because I wanted these drums to pump a little tiny bit. So let's listen to it before and after. Right now it's on, but I'll be switching this on and off, and I'll shut up so that you can hear what's going on. So the setting that I found that worked really well was when the compressor was set to the compressor mode with a fast release. That's what's giving me that pumping. If I didn't want it to pump so hard, I could lengthen the release. Let's listen to it now, before and after. But I do like that pumping effect, so I am going to set that back to, let's set it about at 0.6 seconds, and that will kind of split the difference between those two release times. And then over here, I have the input and output controls and the new auto setting. So if I turn the auto on, then you'll notice that the input control and the output control are linked when you move the input knob. So if I were to increase that right now, you'll notice that the output knob comes down a certain amount as well. So they're linked together right now, but once I have the setting that I like, I can still come over to the output knob and adjust it separately, and that way I can set an automatic input and output balance, but then adjust the overall output level of the compressor afterwards, even when the auto setting is on. Then you'll notice that you have a meter for the input amount, the gain reduction amount, and the output level. And I'm going to leave that set on the GR, which is gain reduction. Up here in the control panel, we have the high-pass filter, which I have bypassed right now because I want to maintain the low frequencies in the drums. The original U73b, the actual hardware unit, didn't have the high-pass filter defeat, so Audified added this, and it's a really nice 6 dB per octave filter at about 100 hertz. Then I'm going to start the drums over here. And then you can see the input and output settings here, which mirror what's happening on the input and output knobs. And then we have a key input. You can have the compression triggered by either the individual left and right channels, just the left channel, and then if it's in stereo, you could choose just the right channel, or you could sum the left and right input together to mono to trigger the entire compressor from a summed mono input, even when the compressor's in stereo. You also have the new external side chain, which I'll show you here in a moment. And then you have these list of presets, which I'm not going to load. But one of the other things you'll notice is the plugin is yellow up here at the top of the window. That's because when I loaded this instance of the plugin, it looked at the color that I had defined on the group or track itself, and in Cubase I had it set to yellow. So all of these controls now show up as yellow as well. well. So that's a really nice way to find which instance of the U73B you're using. So that's how it's working with the drums. Let's move on to the bass guitar. So I'm going to solo the bass guitar group, and let's call up that control panel, or that instance of the U73B. Let's take a listen to what's happening here. So here we have a nice setting, and it's just a squeeze. It's not really adding any compression effect. It's just adding a nice squeeze on the dynamics of the two bass guitar tracks. Let's listen to it before and after. So on this particular effect, I do have the high-pass filter enabled because it really tightened up that low end. Let's listen to it with it on and off. So of course you can use that to season to taste. Now let's move on to the guitars. I did something interesting with the guitars. So when I call up that instance of the U73B, I have its trigger set to the external side chain, and that way I can feed some signal from the vocal tracks into this compressor so that it only triggers when the vocals are active, and that way the guitars never get too loud. So this is a technique known as ducking, and you'll see how it works here when I start the project. And when this happens, I'm going to enable the vocals and the guitars so that you can see what's happening. The gain reduction meter won't start working until the vocals show up, and you'll hear how they start to balance each other out.
I say yes and you say no. Why can't we agree? You say stop and I say go.
So that way, whenever the vocals are happening, the guitars get ducked out of the way a little bit, and they leave room for the vocals. Let's listen again.
The outcome leaves us stranded on the ground. Yesterday was like today. Why does it always seem to work out this way? We're at an impasse.
So that's a great new feature. Now let's move on to the keyboard track, and all I did with the keyboard tracks was add a little bit of a squeeze. So let's reveal that instance of the U73B and take a listen. So I'll solo that group. So here you'll notice that I'm using one of the longer release times. The ones that are in red are program dependent, so it's going to alter the release time depending on the material that you're sending through the compressor. So if you wanted it to be a little bit of a faster release, you could set this to 2.5 and it would come back to 0 a little bit faster in 2.5 seconds, but it's still going to adjust depending on the signal source. Let's split the difference with a 6-second release, and then let's listen to it before and after. See, he's just squeezing this. It's just controlling the dynamics a little bit. Now let's move on to the vocals, and I'm going to solo that group and reveal the control panel.
I say yes and you say no. Why can't we agree? You say stop and I say go. We're living at the yellow in between.
So now let's listen to the before and the after.
You bring me down. The outcome leaves us stranded on the ground. Yesterday was like today. Why does it always seem to work out this way? We're at an impasse. We're at an impasse.
So it really glues those dynamics together. If I wanted this to be a really aggressive sound, I could set the compressor to the limit mode, but I found that the release time of 1.2 seconds works really, really well on most pop vocal tracks. And now let's hear what overall effect the U73B had on our mix. So what I'm going to do is come over to all 5 instances of that plugin, and I'm going to defeat them all. So I'm just going to select all of the tracks right here, and then let's start the playback from the beginning, and I'll bypass all the compressors so you can hear what all 5 of these compressors are doing. So it's amazing that the U73b can make such a dramatic effect on the overall mix. And even though the mix sounds really good right now, there is another compressor that I have bypassed right now, and that's on the master bus, because the U73b originally was a mastering compressor. So let's enable that plugin and take a look at its control panel, and then let's make some adjustments before and after. So I'm going to turn it off right now so that we can continue to listen to the mix, then I'll enable it. So in this instance, I have it set to the longest release time of 10 seconds, and then I've sent it a very gentle amount of input and an equal amount of output so that it balances out the overall level. And then the compression isn't going wild right now, it's just putting that nice mastering squeeze on the final output. And I did turn the high-pass filter off for this. Let's listen to it before and after, and you can decide if you want to keep the original sound of the U73b with the high-pass filter in, or if you want it to sound a little bit more modern by leaving it out. Personally, for this kind of song, I like to leave the high-pass filter off, but it's totally up to you. You can season to taste, and if you really want to maintain that vibe of the original, make sure you leave it on. And before I wrap up, there's one other new feature I want to show you, and that's under the Services menu right here, and that's the oversampling. In the default, it's turned off, but before you do your mix down, you'll want to turn the oversampling on. Enabling the oversampling will allow the U73b to work at its full sonic potential, and when you're rendering, you won't have to worry about it drawing too much computer power from the CPU. So when you render your project, make sure that you turn the oversampling on, but leave it off during mixing. So now that you've seen and heard the U73b, jump on over to Ask.Audio and read the full review. Thanks for watching.